Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, The Invitation to Hawthorn Manor. Hercule Poirot had been enjoying a rather quiet season in Brussels, his days filled with careful tending of his beloved moustaches, a modest number of visitors, and the occasional consultation of Monsieur Giraud's newspapers, which he read with the meticulous eye of a man hunting not for sensation but for subtleties invisible to the common mind. Yet it was on a mild October morning, with a pale sun filtering through his sitting-room window, that a letter arrived which promised to disturb his peaceful routine. The envelope, creamy and heavy, bore the elegant flourish of a hand accustomed to finesse. Poirot, ever the connoisseur of handwriting, immediately noted the delicate loops and graceful upward strokes. It was, he reflected, the hand of someone wealthy, educated, and inclined to precision in all things. He broke the seal and unfolded the paper with deliberate care. Monsieur Poirot, I entreat your assistance in a matter most perplexing and delicate. Hawthorn Manor, my family seat in Devon, has been the scene of events which defy explanation. Strange sounds, sudden disappearances, and whispers of past tragedies haunt its halls. I fear for my household and myself. Your reputation for meticulous observation and extraordinary insight precedes you. I implore you to visit Hawthorn Manor at your earliest convenience. Yours sincerely, Lady Eugenia Ashcombe. Poirot placed his monocle to his eye and examined the text. Ah, mon Dieu, he murmured softly, tapping his fingertips together. A mind in distress. But distress alone is never the cause of mystery. None, it is the human heart, its fear, its secrets, and its errors, that create the true puzzle. He rang his bell. Hastings. My friend. It appears we are summoned to Devon. Captain Hastings, ever ready for adventure and slightly less adept at reading the subtleties of written language, raised his eyebrows. Devon, eh? A quiet countryside, I suppose. Poirot smiled faintly. Quiet in appearance, mon ami. But it is in quiet houses, in hushed rooms, that the loudest secrets often echo. 2 days later, they arrived at Hawthorn Manor. The carriage wound its way through an autumnal landscape, where trees were stripped of many leaves and mist clung to the ground like a delicate veil. The manor itself emerged through the fog, an imposing structure of dark stone, with tall windows reflecting the weak morning sun. Its turrets and gables gave it a slightly forbidding aspect, as though the house were aware of the eyes upon it. From the carriage stepped Lady Eugenia Ashcombe, a woman whose elegance seemed slightly faded, perhaps by worry or sleepless nights. Her pale hair was arranged in a simple chignon, and her attire, though impeccable, was subdued, almost as though she sought to disappear into the background of her own home. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice trembling just enough to suggest anxiety rather than fear. I thank you for coming. There are matters, strange matters here. Things have happened that no one dares speak of. Poirot inclined his head, bowing slightly, his eyes observing her every movement. Madam, I assure you, everything shall be brought into clarity. Pray, allow me to understand the house first. She led them into the drawing-room. Heavy curtains framed the tall windows, and a faint chill lingered in the air. Dominating the room was a grand portrait of Lord Ashcombe, her late husband, eyes gazing solemnly into the distance. Beneath it was a locked cabinet, ornately carved, its surface polished yet concealing some secret, Poirot thought, by the way the dust had accumulated unevenly around its edges. Do not open it, Lady Eugenia whispered. It is better left alone. Poirot, noting the precise way she avoided its center, filed the information silently. OUI, madam. Sometimes the fear of the object is as important as the object itself. As they toured the house, Poirot's acute eyes noted details others might miss: a faintly worn path on the carpet leading to the portrait, a single chair slightly out of alignment, a half-closed music book on the piano with a note tucked inside. The servants, polite but guarded, watched from a distance, their whispers almost audible to Poirot's trained ear. The household, he soon discerned, comprised several key figures: Colonel Barlow, Lady Eugenia's protective brother, a man of strict posture and a slow, considered voice; Clara Whitmore, the governess, young and observant, whose glances seemed to catalogue everything she saw; Dr. Lennox, the family physician, whose calm manner did not fully conceal a certain unease; and Hugo Ashcombe, a friend of the missing heir, whose presence seemed almost incidental yet carried an air of subtle tension. After dinner, Poirot requested to see the drawing-room again. Alone with Hastings, he knelt near the cabinet and examined the floor. A small disturbance in the dust suggested that the cabinet had been moved recently, yet the polish around it was immaculate. "Curious," he muttered. "The evidence is subtle, yet it speaks volumes. Someone wishes to conceal, yes, to hide, a truth within this room." Hastings frowned. "But there's nothing there now, Poirot." "Ah, but that is exactly what one expects the guilty to believe. Nothing visible is often the very place where the truth lies most carefully. You see, Hastings, the human mind fears not the facts, it fears discovery. And that fear leaves its mark." Later that night, as Poirot settled into his guest chamber, he reflected on the air of unease that permeated the house. There were whispers in the corridors, subtle creaks as though someone walked just beyond the corner of one's eye. The shadows seemed longer, more deliberate. Poirot lay back, fingers steepled beneath his chin, listening. "Every mystery, mon ami," he said softly to Hastings, who shared the room, "is a puzzle of human motives. The house merely holds the pieces. And I, with patience and observation, shall assemble them." Patience, Hastings, and the little grey cells. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the windows, carrying with it the scent of damp leaves and something faintly metallic, a scent Poirot filed away, knowing it would speak to him later in the intricate tapestry of the mystery. In the quiet, the manor seemed to breathe, and within its walls, secrets waited. Poirot, with his habitual precision, closed his eyes, confident that when the first scream or the first disappearance came, he would be ready. For in Hawthorn Manor, as he had already discerned, the line between fear and fact was thinner than the mist that clung to the Devon hills. And thus began the tale of whispers, hidden passages, and a family haunted not by ghosts, but by secrets that were waiting for a detective with the patience, insight, and brilliance of Hercule Poirot to reveal them. Chapter 2: The Gathering Storm. The morning after their arrival, Hawthorn Manor appeared deceptively serene. Sunlight filtered through the tall mullioned windows, illuminating the grand drawing-room in gentle gold. Yet beneath the veneer of tranquility, Poirot could sense the taut undercurrent of unease, a tension that was nearly tangible. Every household, he reflected, carries its secrets like shadows, and shadows, unlike the sun, do not fade when illuminated. After a light breakfast, Lady Eugenia led Poirot and Hastings on a tour of the estate. The gardens, though beautiful in their autumnal decay, were suffused with a melancholy hush. Leaves in shades of amber and crimson rustled underfoot, but no bird sang. A few gardeners laboured silently, casting occasional glances toward the manor as if they feared the very walls might overhear their chatter. "This house, it feels alive," Hastings said, glancing uneasily at the towering facade. "Not in a comforting way, either. More watchful." Poirot smiled faintly. "Yes, Hastings. Houses, like humans, bear witness. They do not speak, yet they communicate all the same, through dust, through draughts, through the minutest irregularities." Inside, the household had begun to assemble in the drawing-room. Poirot, ever the observer, studied them quietly. Colonel Barlow, a large man of military bearing, stood rigidly near the fireplace, arms crossed. his eyes, pale and calculating, flicked from Lady Eugenia to the servants with cautious suspicion. Poirot noted the slight crease between the Colonel's brows, evidence of constant vigilance. Clara Whitmore, the governess, sat near the window, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her dark eyes followed every movement, yet her posture suggested detachment, as though she were cataloguing the house, its inhabitants, and the visitors in equal measure. She wore a simple grey dress, the sort favoured by those who did not wish to attract attention, and yet Poirot sensed an intelligence and subtle cunning beneath her calm exterior. Dr. Lennox, meanwhile, appeared calm, almost too calm. His hands rested lightly on the back of a chair, and he spoke in a voice as smooth as polished wood. Yet Poirot, with his instinct for the hidden currents of human behaviour, detected an occasional twitch of the lips, a fissure in the facade that suggested apprehension. And then there was Hugo Ashcombe, a young man of lithe frame and alert eyes, whose presence seemed almost peripheral yet carried an inexplicable weight. He leaned casually against the piano, studying a sheet of music with an intensity that suggested preoccupation beyond simple curiosity. Poirot's trained eyes noticed the way Hugo's fingers traced the notes absent-mindedly, and the faint smudge of graphite on his knuckles betrayed restless nervous energy. As breakfast concluded, Lady Eugenia drew Poirot aside. "Monsieur, I do not wish to alarm you unnecessarily," she said, her voice quivering, "but the house, it has been restless since Hugo arrived. There are noises, voices at night. Sometimes footsteps when no one is present." Poirot inclined his head, his expression one of polite curiosity rather than alarm. "Madam, these things are rarely what they seem. Often, it is not the house but the mind of its inhabitants that produces the most startling illusions. Fear is a powerful accomplice to imagination." Yet even as he spoke, Poirot made careful observations, a faint scratch along the wooden floor near the piano, as though a chair had been moved recently, a small stain on the carpet, almost imperceptible, that suggested something had been spilled, or worse. Every detail, however minor, he noted mentally, filing them for later connection. The first unusual incident occurred that afternoon. Hugo, having excused himself to practice at the piano, was discovered an hour later to have vanished. Hastings nearly leaped from his chair in alarm, and Lady Eugenia's hands flew to her face. Colonel Barlow stormed through the corridors, his voice echoing in sharp commands, yet no trace of Hugo was found. Poirot remained seated, his expression calm. "Mon ami," he said softly to Hastings, "observe that nothing has been broken, no doors forced, no windows disturbed. If one were truly vanished, one would expect signs of struggle. Yet there are none. This is the first puzzle of our day." He directed his attention to the piano. "Notice, Hastings, the sheet music. One page is slightly worn in a way that does not match the others. The pencil markings are new. Whoever was here, or what occurred here, left traces. But they are subtle, and the common mind overlooks them." Poirot spent the rest of the afternoon interviewing the household, one by one, in his meticulous fashion. Lady Eugenia admitted she had been uneasy about Hugo's presence ever since his arrival. He seemed too knowing, too interested in certain things," she whispered. "I feared he would uncover what I wished to remain buried." Colonel Barlow was forthright but defensive, insisting he had no reason to suspect any wrongdoing. Yet Poirot noticed the tension in his jaw and the slight pallor of his complexion. Clara Whitmore, when questioned, offered little, yet her eyes revealed awareness beyond her words. Poirot noted the faintest hesitation when Edward Ashcombe's disappearance was mentioned, a hesitation that suggested a concealed piece of knowledge. Dr. Lennox, by contrast, presented a polished calm, but even he was caught off guard when Poirot casually inquired about his route through the corridors at night. A subtle twitch, a falter in the otherwise smooth cadence of his speech, betrayed the presence of unease, though whether from fear, guilt, or simple anxiety, Poirot could not yet determine. By late afternoon, Poirot retired to the drawing-room once more, alone with Hastings. He examined the locked cabinet beneath the late Lord Ashcombe's portrait with renewed interest. The faint dust line along the floorboard suggested it had been moved recently. The keyhole, though polished, carried the faintest trace of something, a smudge that could indicate a finger that had been there too often or in haste. "Curious, Hastings," Poirot murmured, "how humans fear the obvious. They hide secrets in plain sight. A cupboard, a window, a sheet of music, these can conceal more than a locked door." As evening fell, the house seemed to sigh. The wind rose, rattling the windows and carrying with it a scent faintly metallic, reminiscent of old iron. Poirot observed the shadows stretching across the walls, noting the way the corners seemed to deepen unnaturally. Something stirred within the manor, not a ghost, he concluded, but a presence shaped by human motives, fears, and misdeeds. The first night at Hawthorn Manor ended with Poirot lying awake, considering the day's discoveries. He sensed the delicate pattern forming, the subtle marks of movement, the faint indications of secrecy, the delicate psychological imbalances that made each member of the household a potential part of a larger, darker design. "Hastings," he whispered as his friend dozed beside him, "do you observe how the fear of the unknown sharpens the senses? It is a double-edged blade. One can see much, yet also misinterpret. We must proceed with patience, observation, and most of all, discernment. The storm gathers, my friend. The house, the inhabitants, and the past itself are all weaving a web." Outside, the autumn wind carried a soft whisper through the trees. A single crow cawed, as though signaling the beginning of something hidden, waiting to be revealed. Hawthorn Manor, beautiful yet unsettling, had begun to show its true character. And in its corridors and rooms, secrets that had slumbered for years were stirring once more. Poirot closed his eyes, fingers steepled beneath his chin, his mind already assembling possibilities, testing them, discarding the improbable, and retaining the subtle truths. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring another turn, perhaps a clue, perhaps a warning, and the game, intricate and strange, had only just begun. Chapter 3: The Night of the Whispers. Night descended upon Hawthorn Manor like a slow, deliberate sigh. The autumn wind rattled the leaded windows, sending tremors of chill across the stately rooms. Poirot, ever vigilant, sat in the drawing room, quietly examining the faintest irregularities in the furniture, the dust, and even the curtains, as though the house itself might whisper secrets if one only listened closely enough. Hastings, less inclined to detect the subtle truths of the manor, had retired to his room after a light supper. He left Poirot alone, though not in solitude, for Poirot never truly considered himself so. The house, its sounds, its shadows, its vibrations, was a companion as intricate as any human mind. As the grandfather clock struck 11, a faint noise caught Poirot's attention. A whisper? A sigh? It was difficult to tell. He paused, listening with rapt intensity. There it was again, a soft, deliberate shuffle, as though someone walked along the corridor, careful to avoid the creaking boards, yet unable to mask the faint brush of fabric against polished wood. Poirot rose, his movements precise and almost imperceptible. "Hastings," he murmured softly, "it seems the house is restless tonight. Will you remain awake?" Hastings, groggy yet intrigued, nodded. "Do you think it could be the wind, Poirot?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, mon ami, the wind does not whisper in words. Listen carefully. The wind has no fingers to disturb the dust in precise patterns, nor eyes to glance and conceal. This is something else." He moved silently along the corridor, noting the minute signs, a barely visible indentation on the carpet where someone had paused, a faint fragrance of lavender, though no flowers were near, and a tiny scratch on the polished banister, fresh. Deliberate, yet almost imperceptible. Poirot's mind catalogued every detail, linking them with invisible threads, weaving an invisible map of movement and motive. Reaching the drawing room, he paused. The grand portrait of Lord Ashcombe stared down with impassive eyes. Beneath it, the cabinet remained closed, its surface polished yet hiding secrets. Poirot's gaze flicked to the piano, and he noticed something curious. The music book from the previous day had shifted slightly, as though a hand had rested upon it and then moved away. A sudden cry shattered the quiet, high-pitched, urgent, and distinctly human. Poirot's trained ear recognized it immediately: Lady Eugenia. He dashed down the corridor with Hastings in tow, following the echo of her voice to the library adjoining the drawing room. Lady Eugenia stood, trembling, her hands gripping the edge of a table. "Monsieur Poirot." It spoke. "I heard him. My husband." From the cabinet. Poirot approached with measured calm. "Madam, please compose yourself. Describe exactly what you heard." She clutched at her chest, her eyes wide. His voice. Edward's voice. Crying for help, though he has been gone for a year. I cannot explain it." Poirot's expression remained thoughtful. He examined the cabinet, his fingers tracing the carved wood and the fine dust along the edges. Nothing appeared disturbed, yet Poirot's intuition told him that appearances were deceiving. "Madam," he said softly, "it is not the dead who trouble this house, but the living. And the living leave marks, subtle, but undeniable." Hastings glanced at him, uneasily. "Do you think someone is playing a trick?" "Perhaps, Hastings," Poirot replied. "Or perhaps the house itself bears witness to actions hidden from casual eyes." He opened the cabinet slowly, fully expecting to find some trick or contrivance. Inside, however, was empty space, save for a folded scrap of sheet music and a small key, tarnished yet ornate. Poirot picked up the items carefully, examining them with meticulous attention. The sheet music bore faint pencil marks, indicating recent handling. The key was old, yet its surface carried the faintest trace of fingerprints, smeared in haste. "Curious," Poirot murmured, turning the key between his fingers. "Someone desires concealment. But why invoke fear? Fear is a powerful instrument, and dangerous. It can provoke revelation, or drive men to madness." Lady Eugenia sank into a chair, her face pale and drawn. "Monsieur, what should I do? The house, it mocks me." Poirot seated himself across from her, calm and deliberate. "Madam, it is not the house. It is the mind, the guilt, and the secrets of its inhabitants that create these apparitions. One must observe, test, and allow nothing to escape notice." Hastings, still uneasy, peered around the room. "Do you think this key opened something?" Poirot's eyes glimmered with the faintest smile. "Ah, Hastings, keys are like questions, they unlock doors, and sometimes, the truths behind them. But one must know which door to attempt. Premature exploration can end in confusion, or worse, panic." As the household settled at night, Poirot spent hours in quiet observation. He noted the faint scratching of the wind against the shutters, the irregular patterns of candlelight dancing on the walls, and the subtle creaks of the floorboards, all of which, he reflected, could mask or reveal human presence. Every sound was catalogued, every movement analyzed. In the dead of night, Poirot awoke to another faint noise, a whisper, so soft it might have been imagined. Yet his instincts told him otherwise. Creeping from his room, he moved toward the corridor once more. The hall was empty, silent, except for the distant ticking of the grandfather clock. A subtle draught carried a faint scent, iron, cold and metallic, and Poirot noted the pattern of dust along the floor. Approaching the drawing room, he noticed a chair had been moved slightly from its original position. A small scuff mark on the carpet indicated recent foot traffic. Poirot paused, examining the evidence. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "someone has moved cautiously and deliberately. Nothing is random. Everything is intended to mislead." Returning to his room before dawn, Poirot reflected on the events of the night. The noises, the cries, the whispered fear, all were symptoms of a deeper design. Someone in the house desired concealment, and the fear of exposure had already begun to manifest in subtle ways. "Hastings," he whispered as the first light of morning crept through the window, "tonight has revealed much, though superficially nothing has changed. Observe, the cabinet, the piano, the floor, all are witnesses. And witnesses, mon ami, cannot lie." Outside, the wind continued to rattle the windows, carrying with it the scent of autumn leaves and a faint trace of something else, metallic and ancient. The manor, with its high ceilings, shadowed corridors, and looming portraits, seemed alive, as if it had absorbed the anxieties of its inhabitants and was now reflecting them back. Poirot, his mind active despite the hour, noted each anomaly, each subtle trace. A footprint near the library, faint but distinct. A faint lavender scent lingering near the staircase. A piano key slightly dulled from repeated use. Each clue, minor though it seemed, was a thread in the tapestry of secrets that Hawthorn Manor concealed. As he finally lay down, Hastings stirring beside him, Poirot's thoughts crystallized. The night had only begun to reveal the intricate web of human deception, fear, and hidden truths. And in that web, one thing was certain: the house's whispers were not from ghosts, but from guilt, cunning, and perhaps, murder. Hawthorn Manor had begun its long and deliberate reveal. And Hercule Poirot, with patience, observation, and the careful use of his little grey cells, was prepared to follow every thread to its ultimate conclusion. Chapter 4: Shadows of the Past. The morning after the unsettling events of the previous night, Hawthorn Manor seemed no calmer. The autumn sunlight filtered through high windows, illuminating dust motes in the air, yet the atmosphere remained tense, almost electric, as if the house itself were bracing for revelation. Poirot, as ever, was calm, precise, and alert. The event of the night had provided subtle clues, traces that would, he knew, soon reveal the deeper design hidden within the household. After breakfast, Poirot convened the main family members in the drawing room, ostensibly for polite conversation, but in reality for careful observation. "We must understand the past," he explained softly to Hastings. "Only by understanding the events which shaped this household can one begin to comprehend the mystery at hand." Lady Eugenia Ashcombe sat pale and anxious, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Colonel Barlow, rigid and formal, leaned against the fireplace, his eyes never leaving Poirot. Clara Whitmore, the governess, sat demurely, though Poirot noticed the slight tenseness in her shoulders and the sharp attentiveness of her gaze. Dr. Lennox remained impassive, though his fingers drummed lightly on the armrest of his chair, a subtle manifestation of restrained agitation. Hugo Ashcombe, whom Poirot had observed the previous day, appeared restless, shifting his weight frequently and glancing toward the portrait of the late Lord Ashcombe with an almost imperceptible intensity. Poirot began with gentle, deliberate questions, aimed not at obtaining immediate answers but at observing reactions. "Madam," he said to Lady Eugenia, "tell me once more about the disappearance of your son, Edward. The exact circumstances, if you please." Lady Eugenia's lips trembled. "It was nearly a year ago. Edward had been concerned about the state of our finances. He discovered things that I cannot speak of. One evening, he went for a walk in the estate grounds and never returned. We searched for days. The police, they found nothing." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, noting every micro-expression. The slight tightening of her eyes, the falter in her voice, all suggested both guilt and fear, though fear of what, he could not yet determine. "And the household?" he inquired. "Did anyone else know of Edward's concerns?" Colonel Barlow cleared his throat. "Edward was a young man with curiosity, certainly, but he was often dramatic. Many things worried him unnecessarily." His words were clipped, yet Poirot caught a subtle stiffness, as if he were both defending and concealing. Poirot turned to Clara Whitmore. You were close to Edward, I believe. She hesitated. Yes, but I did not see everything. There were matters he confided to no one. Only in fragments, and even then, he seemed afraid. Her eyes flickered toward Hugo, who stiffened in response. Poirot noted the exchange with quiet interest. Dr. Lennox, when questioned, smiled faintly. Edward was spirited. A young man with concerns beyond his years. One must remember, Monsieur Poirot, that youthful imagination sometimes interprets ordinary events as extraordinary. Yet even as he spoke, Poirot noticed the slightest twitch at the corner of his mouth, a fissure betraying inattention. Finally, Poirot addressed Hugo. You were a friend of Edward, yes? Hugo inclined his head. Yes. But I am not certain how helpful I can be. Edward confided little to me about certain matters. Poirot observed him carefully. His gaze, though outwardly calm, betrayed vigilance. And yet, Hugo, you arrived here soon after Edward's disappearance. Curious timing. One might wonder if there is reason to return. Hugo's lips pressed into a thin line, his fingers tightening around the edge of his chair. Hastings, whispering beside Poirot, murmured, "Do you think he knows something?" Poirot did not answer immediately. He preferred to let silence press, watching as the subtle psychological pressures shaped reactions. After the interviews, Poirot requested a private tour of the rooms Edward had frequented. In the library, he noted the scuff of a chair, a faint indentation in the rug, and a collection of books slightly shifted from their usual order. The past leaves traces, Hastings, he said. Even absence, even a disappearance, is marked in physical reality. Poirot's attention was drawn to the piano again. The sheet music from the previous night, which had been moved slightly, contained pencil markings that suggested repeated handling. Some notes were smudged, and one, in particular, appeared darker, as if someone had pressed harder than usual. Curious, Poirot murmured. It is as if the music itself bears a message. Moving to the cabinet beneath Lord Ashcombe's portrait, he examined the dust and polish carefully. The faint impressions of a hand, nearly imperceptible, traced the outline of a keyhole. Poirot held up the small key found the previous night. It was a perfect fit, though there was no visible indication of what it might unlock. Hastings, he whispered, this house contains secrets not merely hidden, but deliberately designed to mislead. Whoever has moved this key, or left it here, wishes to direct attention elsewhere. It is a ruse, subtle and precise. The afternoon brought more observations. Poirot noticed that one corridor seemed colder than the rest, the air carrying a faint metallic scent. Near the staircase, dust patterns indicated someone had paused repeatedly, weighing steps carefully. Poirot crouched to examine the footprints, small, deliberate, and precise. Notice, Hastings, he said softly, how one footprint points outward, the next inward. The individual intended to confuse the eye. Clever, but not clever enough for me. That evening, Poirot gathered the household once more. Monsieur and Mesdames, allow me to speak plainly. The disappearance of Edward Ashcombe was no accident, and the events of last night, the noises, the whispers, are not of supernatural origin. Fear has clouded judgment, yet reason remains. Someone wishes to hide a truth. That is clear. What remains is to discern who and why. Lady Eugenia's eyes widened, her lips trembling. But monsieur, who could? Poirot's gaze swept the room with calm authority. Madam, it is rarely one person alone who shapes a mystery. Often, there is a design, a network of decisions, a web of human motives. And yet, even the most carefully constructed web contains flaws. Hastings leaned over and whispered, "Do you think it's someone in the house?" Poirot smiled faintly. Hastings, the evidence, the subtle marks of movement, the scuffed floors, the shifted objects, the anxious glances, all point to those within the household. External forces seldom leave such meticulous traces. That night, Poirot retired to his room, but sleep would not come. The events of the day had confirmed what he had long suspected: the past, even when buried, leaves echoes. Hawthorn Manor was alive with them. Shadows, traces, whispers, all waiting for discovery by one patient enough to notice. He lay in the dim candlelight, eyes open, mind active. Every glance, every sound, every hesitation from the household contributed to an intricate puzzle. Poirot's little grey cells were already assembling possibilities, discarding the improbable, and noting the subtle links that would, in time, reveal the full pattern. Outside, the wind rattled the manor windows, carrying a faint metallic tang. Somewhere in the dark corridors, the house seemed to breathe, almost imperceptibly, responding to human fear, guilt, and anxiety. Poirot reflected that tomorrow would bring more clues, more tension, perhaps even revelation. Yet, as always, patience, observation, and reason would triumph where panic and assumption failed. Hawthorn Manor was no ordinary house, Hastings, he thought. Its walls contained secrets, its floors whispered of hidden paths, and its residents harboured truths that, like ghosts, had never fully departed. Poirot, as ever, would follow the trail, carefully, methodically, and inevitably, to the heart of the mystery. Chapter 5: The Secret in the Drawing Room. The morning dawned bleakly over Hawthorn Manor, with a thin drizzle that blurred the gardens into a muted tapestry of brown and gold. The autumn wind sighed through the gables, carrying with it a chill that seemed to seep into every corner of the house. Poirot, as ever, rose early, his mind already engaged with the intricacies of the household and the mysteries it harboured. "Observe, Hastings," he said, as they descended the main staircase, "how even the weather conspires with human emotion. The air is damp, cold, and persistent. It affects both the body and the mind. Fear is easily nourished in such an environment." Hastings shivered. "I rather think it makes a person feel as if the house itself were alive, Poirot. Like it's watching." "Mais oui," Poirot replied, a faint smile playing upon his lips. "And in a sense, it is. Houses observe. They remember. They record. Every step, every tremor of emotion leaves a mark. And it is these marks which I follow, rather than mere appearances." The day began quietly. The household moved with tentative routine, though the memory of the previous night's events, whispers, mysterious footsteps, and the cries of Lady Eugenia lingered like a shadow. Poirot took advantage of the quiet to revisit the drawing room, where the portrait of the late Lord Ashcombe still dominated the wall. Beneath it, the locked cabinet remained, as enigmatic as ever. Poirot crouched, examining the baseboards and the carpet. He noted once more the faint disturbances in the dust, a line where something heavy had been dragged, a smudge where fingers had pressed too firmly on polished wood. He rose, taking in the subtle angles of light from the tall windows. Every reflection, every shadow, might conceal a clue. It was then that a sudden discovery halted him. A tiny scrap of paper, partially hidden beneath the edge of a chair, caught his attention. He picked it up carefully with a gloved hand. It was part of a sheet of music, marked with delicate pencil notations, but faintly stained, as though by some liquid. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Ah, Hastings, notice the subtle markings. Someone has handled this with care, yet in haste. The smudge indicates fear, or nervousness. This is the first tangible trace of our mystery's physical presence." Poirot turned his attention to the cabinet once more. With deliberate precision, he examined every panel and joint. A slight difference in the wood grain near the base suggested a hidden compartment. With careful hands, he pressed along the edges until he felt a faint give, a narrow drawer, concealed from ordinary observation. Inside, he discovered a collection of items that would prove pivotal. A bloodstained glove, small and delicate, as though belonging to a woman. A small brass whistle, polished to a muted gleam. A scrap of sheet music, more elaborate than the one found previously, with notes annotated in a hurried, almost desperate hand. Poirot held the glove to the light, examining it with meticulous care. "Mon Dieu," he whispered, "this is a message, a clue, a silent confession of presence and guilt. The blood is old, yet preserved, it speaks of an incident hidden and deliberately concealed." Hastings, peering over his shoulder, shivered. "Poirot, do you think it belongs to Lady Eugenia?" "Not necessarily, Hastings," Poirot replied. "Observe, it is a woman's glove, yes. But the size, the cut, the delicacy of the stitching suggest someone accustomed to careful attention, not panic. Whoever wore this had control, and yet there is an error. A trace of haste in the handling. That is the essence of human error. One cannot completely mask fear or intention." The brass whistle intrigued Poirot further. He blew gently, and a faint, haunting note echoed through the room. "The whistle is a signal," he mused. "Something intended to summon, warn, or perhaps conceal. It is deliberate, a device of communication. And it is linked, in some fashion, to the disappearance and to last night's mysterious sounds." The sheet music, annotated and stained, revealed a more personal aspect. Poirot traced the pencil markings carefully. "Notice, Hastings, the pattern. The notes are marked in sequences, but there are pauses, intentional pauses. Someone has used this as a code, a signal, a map of events. Music, here, is not merely aesthetic, it is functional. It records action, emotion, or location. One must pay attention to every smudge, every darkened note." Poirot carefully replaced the items and closed the drawer. "Hastings, this is confirmation. The house is a theatre of human design. It is not ghosts that move through these rooms, nor is it superstition that disturbs the mind. It is calculation, fear, and deception, all intricately woven together." Later that afternoon, Poirot summoned the household once more under the pretext of reviewing the day's events. Lady Eugenia was pale, her hands trembling, while Colonel Barlow stood stiffly near the mantelpiece. Clara Whitmore and Dr. Lennox observed from across the room, and Hugo Ashcombe leaned against the piano, his eyes flickering with curiosity and unease. Poirot addressed them calmly. "Mesdames, messieurs, the house has given us our first tangible clue. It is not the cries of the dead that concern us, nor the whispers you hear at night. It is a human design, marked in 3 items, a glove, a whistle, and a piece of music. Each carries information, each is deliberate, and each conceals more than it reveals at first glance." A subtle hush fell over the room. Lady Eugenia's lips parted in protest, but Poirot continued. "Fear is a powerful accomplice to deception. Yet those who act in fear also leave marks, subtle, but indisputable. It is these marks that I observe. And when all is ready, they shall lead us to truth." Hastings leaned over to whisper, "Do you think the glove belongs to Lady Eugenia, Poirot?" Poirot shook his head. "Hastings, it belongs to someone who acts with precision, someone who is accustomed to control. Fear alone is never the entire story. There is calculation, and there is intention. We must now consider motive, opportunity, and timing. The physical evidence provides the stage, the players and their hidden desires will complete the scene." As evening approached, Poirot spent hours in quiet contemplation. He retraced the paths of the household, noting footprints, shifts in furniture, and the faintest disturbances in dust. Each clue connected to another. The glove suggested concealment, the whistle hinted at communication, the sheet music encoded action and emotion. Together, they formed a complex tableau, a pattern deliberately designed to mislead casual observers, yet transparent to the methodical eye. By nightfall, Poirot was convinced of one truth: the mystery of Hawthorn Manor was no longer a question of fear or superstition. It was a crime, deliberate, carefully concealed, and psychologically intricate. The first pieces of evidence were now in his possession, and the challenge lay in linking them to the movements, fears, and desires of the household itself. As the manor settled into its nocturnal hush, Poirot reflected on the delicate balance of patience and observation. "Hastings," he said softly, "tomorrow we begin the next stage. We shall follow the threads, observe the reactions, and uncover the hidden connections. The house may seem calm, but the human heart is restless. And in that restlessness lies the truth." Outside, the wind carried a soft, metallic scent once more, mingling with the faint fragrance of autumn leaves. Within the manor, shadows deepened, corners seemed to lengthen, and the faintest whisper of movement suggested that someone, somewhere, was aware that the first step in Poirot's investigation had been taken. Hawthorn Manor had revealed its first secret, and the game of observation, deduction, and human psychology had begun in earnest. The house, with its creaks, shadows, and subtle marks, would speak further. And Hercule Poirot, patient, meticulous, and unflappable, would listen. Chapter 6: The Vanishing of Hugo Ashcombe. The morning after Poirot's discovery of the glove, whistle, and annotated sheet music began with a curious stillness over Hawthorn Manor. The drizzle of the previous day had lifted, leaving the estate damp and mist-laden, the garden paths glistening with water. Yet the atmosphere within the manor remained taut with unease. The household moved cautiously, every glance and gesture tinged with suspicion. Poirot, as ever, rose early. Hastings, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, followed him down the long corridor. "I suppose today will be another quiet morning, Poirot," Hastings said, his tone laced with irony. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Hastings, quiet is the luxury of fools. Observe, my friend, how quiet conceals action. Today, we shall see what restlessness reveals." The first warning came at breakfast. Hugo Ashcombe, usually a figure of measured composure, was missing from the table. Hastings frowned. "He's late, Poirot. Perhaps he slept in." Poirot shook his head. "No, Hastings. Hugo rarely sleeps past dawn. This is deliberate, and it has meaning. Watch and see." A search of the main corridors yielded nothing. The windows were secure, the garden paths undisturbed. Poirot's gaze, however, was drawn to the small details: a chair slightly askew in the drawing-room, dust patterns disturbed near the portrait of Lord Ashcombe, and a faint metallic scent lingering in the air. He crouched, examining a floorboard near the cabinet. A subtle draught whispered through the room, almost imperceptible, as though air were moving through a hidden passage. "Observe, Hastings," Poirot murmured, tracing the outline of the baseboards with careful fingers. "This draught, it suggests the presence of a concealed route. Someone may have used it, or is using it, for movement unseen. Hugo's absence is not mere happenstance. It is deliberate, and we shall uncover the path." Poirot summoned Lady Eugenia, Colonel Barlow, Clara Whitmore, and Dr. Lennox to the drawing-room. Each entered with visible unease, sensing the heightened tension. Poirot addressed them with calm authority. "Mesdames, Messrs, Hugo Ashcombe is missing. This is no trivial disappearance. The evidence, the subtle movement of air, the displaced dust, the slight shifts in furniture, all suggest a deliberate concealment. I must ask your cooperation." Lady Eugenia's hands trembled. "Monsieur Poirot, what do you mean by a concealment?" Poirot's gaze remained fixed on the cabinet. "I mean, madam, that someone is moving through this house unseen, using the corridors, the rooms, and perhaps even secret passages. The house itself is a labyrinth, and it has been designed to hide both people and actions." Colonel Barlow's posture stiffened. "Secret passages?" This is absurd. The house is old, yes, but not haunted with hidden corridors. Poirot's eyes twinkled faintly. Ah, Colonel, one does not require ghosts to conceal human action. Architecture itself can provide the cleverest alibi. Observe, please. Poirot led the group to the library. With precise movements, he pressed along the edges of the bookcases and paneling, demonstrating the feint given a section of wall. With a gentle push, a narrow opening appeared, revealing a hidden passage dimly lit by a shaft of daylight filtering from a small window at the far end. Hastings' eyes widened. Good heavens! How did I never notice that? Poirot smiled faintly. Hastings, notice the ingenuity. The passage is designed for movement unseen, and yet it cannot conceal traces of human error. Footprints, dust disturbances, and subtle shifts of objects betray its use. The household reacted with a mixture of astonishment and anxiety. Lady Eugenia clutched her hands to her chest. Who would use such a thing? Poirot's gaze swept the room. That, madam, is the question. And the answer is hidden within the motives, fears, and desires of those present. Hastings, still peering into the narrow corridor, asked, Do you think Hugo used it? Poirot nodded. It is a strong possibility. Yet we must be methodical. Hugo's disappearance may be voluntary, coerced, or the result of accident. We must consider each alternative, observe carefully, and gather evidence before reaching conclusion. Poirot requested that the household remain in the drawing room while he and Hastings explored the passage. It was narrow, just wide enough for a man to squeeze through, with rough-hewn stone walls and a faintly musty odor. Footprints in the dust suggested recent movement. Poirot noted the pattern carefully, small, deliberate steps, with weight shifted slightly to avoid brushing the walls. At the far end, the passage opened into a small chamber hidden behind the paneling of what appeared to be a storage room. There, to Poirot's satisfaction, lay the first tangible clue, a scarf, unmistakably Hugo's, draped over a chair. The scarf bore faint stains, not blood, but some unknown substance Poirot would later test. It suggested haste, yet also deliberation, a combination Poirot recognized immediately. Returning to the drawing room, Poirot addressed the household. Hugo has been here. The passage confirms movement. Someone, perhaps he, perhaps another, has used this secret way to move without being seen. Now, we must consider motive, timing, and opportunity. Colonel Barlow's skepticism was palpable. All this is very clever, Poirot, but surely we are chasing shadows. Hugo may simply be playing a prank. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Mon Colonel, consider the details, the draught through the cabinet, the subtle metallic scent, the disturbed dust, the scarf. These are not shadows. These are facts. Facts demand attention, and they speak volumes when one listens. Lady Eugenia trembled. Monsieur, could it be Edward's spirit guiding Hugo? Poirot smiled gently. Madam, the dead do not move objects, nor do they leave footprints. It is the living who create such illusions. Fear interprets movement, imagination exaggerates it. It is the mind, not the ghost, that haunts this house. Hastings whispered, Poirot, the glove, the whistle, the sheet music, do you think they're connected to Hugo's disappearance? Poirot nodded. OUI, Hastings. Each item is part of the same design. Someone has planned, carefully, the movement, the signals, and the concealment. Hugo may be a participant or an unwitting pawn. The challenge is to distinguish intention from accident. That evening, Poirot convened the household once more. We must examine all interactions carefully. Observe glances, gestures, speech, each carries subtle information. Fear, guilt, and calculation leave traces not in words, but in behavior. I shall speak with each of you privately." The interviews that followed were delicate exercises in observation. Lady Eugenia admitted to faint hints of anxiety, particularly regarding the family's finances and the estate's hidden burdens. Clara Whitmore revealed subtle inconsistencies in her observations of Hugo's movements, though she appeared nervous, careful not to reveal too much. Dr. Lennox's calm exterior betrayed slight tension when the secret passage was mentioned, while Colonel Barlow remained outwardly defiant, though Poirot noted the slightest blanch when the discussion touched on responsibility and vigilance. Hugo, when questioned privately, admitted to using the passage, though his story was incomplete. He claimed to have been searching for something, of note, a message he believed hidden by Edward before his disappearance. Poirot observed every hesitation, every inflection, every glance, filing them carefully in his mental catalogue. By nightfall, Poirot had established several crucial facts. Hugo had indeed used the hidden passage. The glove, whistle, and sheet music were deliberately placed to mislead or signal. The household harbored anxieties and inconsistencies suggesting hidden motives. Fear and calculation were intertwined, creating the intricate web of events that haunted Hawthorn Manor. As he retired that night, Poirot reflected on the delicate pattern forming before him. "Hastings," he whispered, "Hugo's disappearance, the secret passage, the subtle clues, all are threads in a tapestry of human intent. One misstep, one revelation, and the pattern may emerge. We are close, but patience and observation remain paramount." Outside, the wind whispered through the gables, carrying the metallic tang and the scent of damp leaves. Hawthorn Manor, with its hidden corridors, creaking floors, and restless shadows, seemed to breathe once more. Within its walls, the stage was set. An Hercule Poirot, with his unparalleled skill in observation, deduction, and psychological insight, was ready to follow every thread to its ultimate truth. Chapter 7: Secrets and Confrontations. The following morning, Hawthorn Manor seemed to pulse with a quiet tension, as if the walls themselves held their breath. The events of the previous night, Hugo's mysterious disappearance and the discovery of the hidden passage, had left the household both uneasy and restless. Poirot, however, moved with his customary calm, his sharp eyes observing every subtle expression, every hesitation, every whispered glance. Hastings, following closely, whispered as they descended the stairs. "Poirot, I feel as though the house itself is watching us. Every shadow seems alive." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Ah, mon ami, a house merely reflects the anxieties of its inhabitants. And these walls are full of human emotion, fear, guilt, and secret intent. If one observes carefully, the house speaks more clearly than any person." Their first task of the morning was to interview the household once more. Poirot insisted upon privacy, wishing to catch reactions unmediated by social expectations or polite company. Lady Eugenia, pale and anxious, admitted that Hugo had always seemed unusually determined to uncover Edward's secrets. "I don't understand him, monsieur," she said, wringing her hands. "He comes here, appearing concerned, yet he seems searching for something beyond ordinary curiosity. I fear he may put himself in danger." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, madam, concern often disguises determination. And determination, when guided by obsession, can be perilous. Observe, Hastings, how fear and calculation often coexist in the same mind." Next, he questioned Clara Whitmore, the governess. Her responses were measured, yet Poirot noted the subtle tensing of her hands and the faint upward flick of her eyes whenever Hugo was mentioned. "Clara," Poirot said gently, "you know more than you reveal. Tell me, has Hugo confided in you about Edward, or about anything hidden in this house?" Clara hesitated. "Only fragments, monsieur. He suspected something concerning Edward's disappearance. He believed there were notes, messages, perhaps something hidden in the manor itself." Poirot's fingers steepled under his chin. OUI. And what of yourself? Have you observed anything unusual in these corridors, in this house? Clara's gaze dropped. Perhaps I should have spoken sooner. But I did not wish to alarm anyone. Before Poirot could press further, Colonel Barlow entered the room. His expression was stern, defensive. Monsieur, I fail to see why we need further questioning. This is becoming absurd. Hugo is young and restless, he may have wandered off. There is no mystery, no crime. Poirot inclined his head politely, though his eyes were sharp. Colonel, appearances are often deceptive. The mind constructs illusions, but facts, even subtle ones, reveal truth. Hugo's movements, the hidden passage, the items discovered yesterday, all are evidence. Ignoring them serves only to prolong uncertainty. Dr. Lennox, ever composed, finally spoke. Poirot, you seem convinced there is deliberate action. But perhaps you are interpreting ordinary behavior as sinister. Hugo may indeed be seeking his own amusement, or acting out of curiosity. Poirot's gaze was unwavering. Dr. Lennox, note the details, footprints in the dust, scuff marks on the floor, disturbed furniture, the metallic scent in the corridors. These are not accidental. They speak of deliberate design. Having assessed reactions, Poirot called the household together in the drawing room once more. This time, the purpose was clear, to observe interactions, to catch hesitations, glances, and micro-expressions that might indicate guilt, fear, or concealment. Hugo entered, pale but composed, claiming to have been exploring the hidden passage to search for notes he believed Edward had left behind. His story seemed plausible, yet Poirot noticed inconsistencies. The scarf found the previous day, the scuff marks near the cabinet, and the faint smell of metallic tang all suggested someone else's presence, deliberate, unseen, and careful. Poirot addressed the group calmly. Mesdames, messieurs, the passage and the hidden items tell a story. But we must ask ourselves, who benefits from concealment, and what is the purpose of the secrecy? Lady Eugenia's lips trembled. Monsieur, what do you mean? Poirot's eyes swept the room. Madam, there are alliances, conscious or unconscious. Trust may be betrayed, fear may be manipulated. Sometimes, one uses another as a pawn, deliberately, subtly, invisibly. A silence fell over the room. Hastings whispered, "Do you think someone is manipulating Hugo?" Poirot nodded. Yes, Hastings. But note this, manipulation is subtle. It often uses suggestion, encouragement, and observation rather than overt command. Our task is to identify the instigator and understand the motive. Poirot's gaze landed on Clara. Her hands fidgeted slightly, her eyes briefly avoiding his. Clara, tell me honestly, have you guided Hugo, or suggested he search for any item connected to Edward? Clara's voice faltered. I may have suggested he look in certain places. I did not mean harm, monsieur. Only to understand what happened to Edward. Poirot's expression softened. A small act can have great consequence. Your actions are noted, but they serve as part of the puzzle, not its solution. Now, we observe the results of these suggestions. Turning to Hugo, Poirot asked, and what of the whistle, the glove, and the sheet music discovered yesterday? Did you encounter them? Hugo hesitated. Yes. I found them. But I don't understand their significance. Perhaps Edward left them as a message, or perhaps they were placed by someone else. Poirot's eyes glimmered. And that, my friend, is precisely what we must determine. Timing, placement, and intention are everything. It is not merely the presence of objects, but the orchestration of their discovery that reveals the truth. Colonel Barlow, clearly growing impatient, muttered under his breath, "Enough of this nonsense." The boy wondered, that is all. Poirot turned to him calmly. Colonel, consider the facts, the hidden passage, footprints, objects deliberately placed, and a disappearance. These are not trivial coincidences. And note, the greatest deception often relies upon the complacency of the cautious observer. Lady Eugenia, growing more agitated, interjected, Monsieur, are you saying someone in this house is responsible for Edward's disappearance? Poirot inclined his head. It is a strong possibility, madam. And we must consider every reaction, every hesitation, every glance. Fear and guilt betray themselves subtly, often unconsciously. That evening, as the household retired, Poirot and Hastings reconvened in the drawing room. Poirot examined the items once more, the glove, the whistle, the sheet music, and the scarf. He traced the sequence of events in his mind, considering motives, opportunity, and psychological tendencies. Hastings, he said softly, we are close. Observe how each action connects, a secret passage, hidden items, guided searches, and subtle manipulations. The web is intricate, but not infinite. A single misstep, a single overlooked trace, will reveal the pattern. Hastings frowned. Do you think the instigator will make a mistake soon? Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. Patience, mon ami. The mind under pressure cannot help but betray itself eventually. It is only a matter of observation, careful timing, and subtle confrontation. We shall see who moves, and why. Outside, the wind rattled the gables and whispered through the hidden passages, carrying a metallic tang and the faint scent of damp leaves. Hawthorn Manor, with its secret corridors, restless inhabitants, an intricate web of fear and deception, was poised on the brink of revelation. And Hercule Poirot, calm, methodical, and unyielding, was ready to trace every thread to its origin. The stage was set. Tomorrow, the first confrontation would occur, and hidden alliances would begin to unravel. Secrets, carefully preserved for decades, were on the verge of exposure. Chapter 8, The Revelation in Hawthorn Manor. The manor was hushed that morning, the calm before the storm. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as if sensing that the final act of Hawthorn Manor's long, dark mystery was about to unfold. Poirot, ever precise and deliberate, prepared himself for what he knew would be a confrontation of minds and motives. Hastings followed closely, nervous but trusting his friend's instincts. Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room. Lady Eugenia, pale and anxious, occupied a chair near the fire. Colonel Barlow stood stiffly, hands behind his back. Clara Whitmore and Dr. Lennox watched quietly, while Hugo Ashcombe leaned against the piano, fidgeting with the scarf Poirot had earlier found in the hidden passage. The atmosphere was taut, electric, each face betraying some unspoken thought, a hidden fear. Mesdames, Messrs, Poirot began, his voice calm yet commanding, we have spent days observing, investigating, and patiently gathering evidence. We have noted footprints, dust disturbances, a secret passage, a glove, a whistle, sheet music, and a scarf. Each item was carefully placed to mislead or to signal, to guide attention away from the truth. Hastings whispered, you're about to reveal it all, aren't you? Poirot nodded slightly. Patience, Hastings. The truth is a delicate instrument, it must be played at the precise moment. He turned first to Hugo. You, my young friend, have been searching for Edward, believing in messages and clues left behind. That is true. But the evidence shows that someone has guided you, deliberately, subtly, invisibly. This is the first revelation. Hugo, though seemingly active, was manipulated by another mind within this household. Hugo's face paled. Manipulated? By whom? I don't understand. Poirot's gaze shifted to Clara Whitmore. She froze, her hands clutching the edge of her chair. Clara, Poirot said gently, you admitted yesterday to suggesting locations for Hugo to search. Your intent was ostensibly innocent, to uncover Edward's fate. But your actions also guided him into situations that allowed concealment and misdirection. Clara's lips trembled. I did not mean. I only wanted to know the truth. Ah, but intention and consequence, Poirot said softly, are not always the same. Now, let us consider the glove. He held up the small blood-stained glove. This glove does not belong to Lady Eugenia, nor does it belong to Hugo. It belongs to the person who sought to hide evidence of a crime. It was deliberately placed to mislead. All eyes turned to Dr. Lennox. Poirot's gaze was sharp, deliberate, and unrelenting. Doctor, the glove is yours, is it not? Dr. Lennox's composure faltered. A faint twitch betrayed him. I did not. Silence, Poirot said gently, for the facts speak more eloquently than words. The whistle, the sheet music, the scarf, and the secret passage all point to you. The metallic scent, the precise footprints, the careful manipulation of Hugo, the disturbances in dust and objects, all are consistent with a mind trained to conceal but inevitably betraying itself through subtle clues. Your attempt to orchestrate the discovery of Edward's disappearance has been meticulous, yet not perfect. Hastings muttered, "Good heavens! I never suspected him." Poirot held up a hand. Observe, Hastings. Human nature is never simple. The motives are layered, and the execution often relies on the complacency of others. Dr. Lennox, you were entrusted with Edward's well-being, yet you harbored resentment and desire, motives hidden beneath civility and calm. Lady Eugenia gasped. But why, monsieur? Why would he? Poirot continued, Edward discovered something you wished to conceal, something tied to family and finances. You acted to prevent exposure, using the whistle to signal, the glove as misdirection, the sheet music as a coded map of movement. Hugo, innocent and curious, became an unwitting participant in your plan, following suggestions planted by Clara, herself motivated by concern and curiosity. And the secret passage allowed you movement without observation, to orchestrate fear and misdirection. Dr. Lennox's face was pale, his hands trembling. I only meant to protect. I did not intend. Poirot shook his head. Intentions, mon ami, cannot erase consequences. The disappearance of Edward, the staging of the items, the creation of fear and confusion, all were consequences of your choices. Yet, the evidence, though subtle, was undeniable. Human error, the metal scent, the footprint pattern, the small smudge on the sheet music, betrayed you. Hugo, recovering his composure, stepped forward. Edward, he was my friend. You used me. Poirot nodded. Unwittingly, yes. Yet Hugo's curiosity was the key that revealed the passage, the glove, the whistle, and the sheet music. The carefully laid traps could not have worked without his involvement. And now, the mystery stands revealed. Lady Eugenia's hands covered her mouth. I cannot believe, all this time. Poirot continued calmly. It is natural, madam. The most intricate deceptions rely upon trust and appearances. The household, though aware of Edward's disappearance, relied upon assumptions. And assumptions are easily manipulated. Colonel Barlow, finally speaking, said gruffly, so it was Lennox all along? Using the boy to cover his own tracks. Poirot inclined his head. Indeed, Colonel. And yet note, each individual contributed to the mystery, even inadvertently. Clara guided Hugo, Hugo discovered the passage, and the household's assumptions allowed the manipulation to continue. The house, with its hidden corridors and careful concealments, provided the theatre, but the actors, human beings, wrote the script through fear, ambition, and error. Poirot placed the glove, whistle, and sheet music on the table. Let these items remain as testimony to the sequence of events. They reveal intention, error, and consequence. The key, the secret passage, the subtle traces, all are evidence of deliberate design, which has now been unraveled. Dr. Lennox, finally, slumped into a chair, pale and defeated. I acted for protection, but... Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. Mon ami, the protection of one secret at the cost of a life is not protection at all. Edward's disappearance, though unintentional in its fatal outcome, was the result of manipulation, concealment, and fear. Now that the evidence has been assembled, there is no longer a place for doubt. Justice, though delayed, will follow truth. Hastings whispered beside Poirot, "It's incredible. The house, the people, the clues, all pointing to one mind, yet so many were involved in the deception." Poirot nodded. "OUI, Hastings. The human mind is intricate and human error inevitable. The glory of observation, patience, and deduction lies in tracing subtle traces, noting fear, hesitation, and misdirection. The little grey cells, applied with method and calm, reveal what passion and panic seek to conceal." Lady Eugenia, still trembling, asked, "Monsieur Poirot, Edward, will we ever know exactly what happened to him?" Poirot's eyes softened. "We may never know every detail, madam, but we know the sequence, the intention, and the responsible mind. That is sufficient. The truth is revealed, and in that revelation lies the possibility of closure." Hugo, his voice steady now, said, "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I see now how subtle the deception was, how even small actions contributed to the larger mystery." Poirot smiled faintly. "Yes, Hugo. The smallest detail, a tiny misstep, a faint trace of dust, a pencil mark, all are meaningful if one observes with care. The extraordinary is often hidden in the ordinary." The household, though shaken, began to breathe again. The tension that had gripped Hawthorn Manor for weeks slowly lifted. The house, once alive with whispers and shadows, now seemed still, as if satisfied that the truth had been revealed. Hastings, turning to Poirot, said softly, "You've done it again, Poirot. The mystery is solved, and yet the human drama is far more intricate than any crime." Poirot's gaze lingered on the high windows, where the autumn sunlight now spilled into the room. "OUI, Hastings. The greatest mysteries are rarely of objects alone. They are of human hearts, fears, and desires. And when one observes patiently, with intelligence and compassion, the truth will always emerge. Hawthorn Manor has revealed its secrets. And now it rests, as do we, in the quiet of understanding." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying away the metallic scent and the damp chill. Hawthorn Manor, its corridors empty, its shadows retreating, seemed to breathe with relief. And inside, Hercule Poirot, calm and triumphant, had once again exercised the delicate art of observation, deduction, and psychological insight to illuminate truth in the midst of human deception. The case was closed.